I'm delighted to be introducing Richard Masci, who's Head of Systems at Airbus Americas.
Hi, everyone. We're going to talk about a bit of Airbus at the beginning, what we've done through T&E. Then we're going to talk about our overall project with our partner, AppZen. And then we're going to talk about a bit of what we got out of that and our next steps. But let's talk right away about Airbus Americas. Airbus Americas in the US is represented by all the different divisions, and we have three main divisions: commercial aircraft, helicopters, and military and space activities. So as you can see, our representation is quite substantial. We have more than 15 different US customers and operators for the commercial aircraft side. We have more than 2,500 helicopters in service today in the US, and we have extensive activities on the military side and the homeland security, some aircraft and the helicopters as well. We have an extensive network of US partners through our suppliers that help us kind of delivering our great products. We spend more than $50 billion since 1990 on the US soil. Let's talk about our shared service in Airbus. We basically launched our T&E program some years ago in 2018, to be more specific. This program covers the three divisions that I just mentioned: commercial aircraft, helicopters, and defense space. And we basically achieved the initial shared service focusing mainly on these different entities that you can see in the US through the usage of AppZen on our program. During this journey, we basically reached approximately 60% of peak pre-COVID, and today we are at an average of 50% automation. I will come back to automation when it comes to T&E and AppZen in a couple of minutes. We reached a peak as well of 85% of reduction of effort that I'm going to explain as well later. We had a reduction of FT, it's the number of persons managing the review, and we divided the number by 10. To be extremely specific, we had 2 FT working when we had peaks on the T&E program, and today we basically run the program with 0.2 FTE. In terms of compliance, this is the main topic for today. We basically reach 100%, or if I want to be more specific, 99.41% of compliance. And we had a reduction of cost of approximately 89%. The shared service, in fact, got transferred from the US to Lisbon in Portugal last year. And during this transfer, the first program that was activated was basically the T&E. So this year, 2022, we have 8 entities currently activated within the scope of Airbus. We manage approximately 19,000 expense reports. It's an estimate for this year. We're going to definitely reach that level of expense reports. It's a bit less than pre-COVID, in fact. 50% of touchless expense reports. So what is a touchless expense report? Those are the expense reports that in fact is going to be submitted by the employee, approved by the manager, and they're going to go directly for payment. They will not be reviewed by any human being. The only review that is done is by the AI, the robot on the back end, that's going to review each and every line of the expense report. And we have approximately 14 different reviews for each line that is automatically processed by the AI. And so it means that 50% of our expense reports are basically paid directly to the employee, and we'll see exactly the benefits later. 85% of reduction of effort. What is the reduction of effort? This is a KPI that we use compared to a fully manual review. Before 2018, an expense report had, let's say, an average of 20 or 30 lines. Each and every line needed to be reviewed manually. Today, only 15% of these lines are reviewed manually. 85% are automatically reviewed by the AI and, in fact, are ready to be validated by the AI. So it's a huge improvement within our process. And I already mentioned that 99.41% of accuracy. 2023, we are basically aiming at doubling the number of entities, and those entities are committed. We are basically estimating 34,000 expense reports for 2023, 70% touchless expense report. This is our target, and 95% of reduction of effort. This is also our target for 2023. For the accuracy, we're going to probably remain approximately the same. It's a target, but I think we already reached it. It was one of our commitments to activate the AI in the past. For the project, the problem definition that we had initially was that we were managing 22 million approximately budgeted travel, which was roughly 6% of our total operating expense. We used to have a bit less than 10,000 travel by air. It was representing approximately 14,000 expense reports with more than 140,000 lines. And those lines, as explained, they were reviewed manually before our new program. We also had some micro policies within the organization that were creating even additional complexity. Our T&E analysts were capable of managing 2 languages. At that time, it was Spanish and English, which was already helpful for us, but definitely not enough. We had some bias on reviewing expense report. As soon as you include a human in the process, you have bias. We had a very low level of compliance, and we had a high cost for auditing. And those definition problems, basically, our objective was to kind of solve all of that. How did we solve that? Through a clear vision and requirements. And those requirements were very specific. At that time, in 2017 and 2018, we wanted to create automation. Basically, at that time, automation is going to bring savings and it's going to create a framework for compliance. And this framework for compliance, in fact, goes through a clear and meaningful set of rules. And those rules are created through your travel and expense policy. So creating automation was for us the most important element. The second most important element was also to increase compliance. Increasing compliance through AppZen, I would say, is the basis of this product. The system is capable of managing more than 40 different languages. It's capable of basically getting information and data from different sources, multiple sources, the web, your policies, and other different elements that they can basically use as a reference for the review in terms of compliance. And this is a game changer within an organization in terms of compliance, a total game changer. And the last point for us in our vision was to be able to start setting up the foundations for the shared service. This was also a critical path for us because we were basically managing things slightly locally, each entity. They were reviewing their program on their own with their own policy, and creating a shared service through the activation of artificial intelligence basically was allowing us in the future to have a center of expertise to create a low-cost activity, because shared services are usually positioned in countries with low-cost salaries, to basically bring value added to the program through synergies that the shared service can bring and additional intelligence. And the last one is basically by activating a shared service, by working on your automation and by increasing compliance, you suddenly open the door to create an expansion of the program to additional entities in Airbus. And that was our last objective through those 3 main visionary requirements. Let's now talk about AppZen a little bit. The risk score in AppZen is extremely central. You know, the low, medium, and high. So the finance team, at least in Airbus, focuses only on the reports that are non-compliant. The ones that are compliant through medium or low risk score, they are automatically processed. Remains the high score that we review manually, and those ones, they basically have full attention from our shared service today. Second point is gift and hospitality. This is a critical element in terms of compliance for an organization, making sure that you can track accurately gift and hospitalities and secure anti-corruption and anti-bribery. And we did so. We did so with this new program through our partner AppZen. And we, in fact, had one case that was an interesting one that we basically spotted. Ultimately, we discovered it was not bribery situation, but at least the system captured a name that was activated in the database of the FBI, and we managed to go through a thorough analysis to basically release this expense report ultimately to the employee with payment, because it was not, in fact, a bribery situation, but the system was powerful enough to capture something through a simple name in the expense report. It's a fully digital solution, fully compliant, I was already explained, and there's a complete audit trail, and this is extremely important for historical figures. I already mentioned the 40 plus languages, 100 more plus currencies covered in the system. The robot is active 24/7. This is also a critical element because an employee can submit an expense report at any time, any day, and this expense report is going to be reviewed immediately and automatically by the robot. There's a very short timeline implementation. For us, the technical activation was 1 week. And then we started to retain in-house the expertise on AppZen, allowing us, in fact, to provide improvements all along our journey, which is also a very important point, specifically when we talk about cost. Fully compliant with Airbus IT security requirements. I mean, of course, you are talking about employees, so you need to ensure that in terms of IT security, you flag all the requirements when it comes to IT security, and this is the case with our partner AppZen. So let's now talk about the scope of the project and the key revelations. We started this project in 2017 when we started to discover AppZen, and we launched the project in 2018 with an activation end of 2018. So we launched that project for the 3 divisions that I already mentioned earlier, and in fact, it was an interesting journey. in 2020, just like any other companies, we got hit by the COVID. And so related to that, we started to have to adapt. Initially, we wanted to expand the project, but we couldn't because of COVID. During COVID, or just before COVID, our automation was 60% approximately. And right after COVID, a month later, and after stopping all travel for our employees, we suddenly discovered that we still had expense reports that were submitted by employees. And of course, those expense reports, they were non-travel related. And we saw that our automation went from 60% to 19%. And obviously, we started to ask ourselves some questions. What is going on? We are still submitting expense reports. The automation shouldn't change because we implemented AppZen and everything should be basically following the expected benefit that we were aiming at the beginning. But we realized, in fact, that we focused a lot on travel. We focused very little on non-travel. And so we started to launch an analysis of the non-travel, and this analysis basically launched an optimization project. This was not planned initially. That it was a revelation for us that the initial project didn't cover 100% of the scope, and non-travel was also a key element of our journey. We launched this optimization project. We improved our return on investment of AppZen based on this project. And today we are successful on travel and non-travel. The non-travel usually covers some elements that are HR and procurement related. And the objective of this optimization was to kind of push back what belongs to procurement to a more account payable process or procure to pay process. And on the HR side, kind of rework with HR some expenses that they could take into consideration within another process, like, for example, virtual card, because you can also manage some spend through virtual cards today. And the last element was for us the expansion. Now, the two overcoming challenges that we had during this journey. The first one is obviously human resistance. When you start talking about artificial intelligence within an organization that is not prepared for that, you suddenly have an interesting reaction. That reaction is a blocking point. What is artificial intelligence? What's going to happen if we activate it? Are we going to be compliant? Because we believe that we are compliant today. So are we going to be still compliant towards our existing standards? A lot of questions starting to raise, and change management in this case is extremely critical. Communication, making sure that you explain the benefits that you can get out of artificial intelligence. Those are, I would say, paramount elements that you have to take into consideration to be successful within this journey. You bring disruption with this type of new technology. And disruption raises questions. That's why, once again, change management, communication on the benefits that you're going to get out of that are extremely critical. Second element of the challenge was the employee behavior. When you activate such a system, you start doing some tests. And when you start the test, you are kind of almost shocked by the result. And this is something that then you need to take into consideration. How are we going to ensure that not only we kind of spot the deficiencies, but how can we improve our employees in terms of behavior? How can we help them getting better at managing their travel and their non-travel activities? And how can we help them managing their expenses? So training, of course, through the program is critical towards your employees. Change management, communication as well. We basically had some interesting use cases during this journey. The first one, slightly explained by Saman, some of our employees they were not following the threshold that we have in our policy for restaurants, for example. This was systematically blocked. We had some requests for unauthorized expenses. I have a very interesting example. One of our employees was working in California on a parking lot with one of our customers, and they suddenly spotted a turtle. And so they wanted to kind of take care of the turtle to avoid any incident with the turtle and a car. And so they went to a pet shop, they bought a cage for the turtle, and they put the turtle in the cage. And of course, the employee requested reimbursement for this cage. It was right away spotted by AppZen because, strangely enough, pet expenses are not covered in our policy, and it's flagged as unauthorized expenses in AppZen. So we let HR deal with this type of situation when it's spotted. Second, other use case that in this case becomes a bit less compliant is creation of fake receipts. This is something that happens, unfortunately, in some organizations, but AppZen is extremely powerful to spot this type of fake receipts based on different very powerful rules. This employee, in fact, kind of submitted the fake receipt a couple of months later during another year. So very difficult to spot something like that when you have 5 or 6 months difference between the two receipts, the one that was the original and a new one that has been totally recreated based on the old one. So that was spotted, and same thing, we let HR deal with this type of situation. 3 examples of where AppZen has revealed incredibly valuable data. The day we activated AppZen, the day after, we reached right away 13% of automation. So we were already, after 1 day of usage of AppZen, we were already at 13% less manual activity in our organization. 4 months later, we were at 35%. And I would say almost a year later, we were at the peak that I mentioned, 60%. So you can see the increase was very fast. And you can imagine on the back end, the saving that you can create. Shorter reimbursement timeline. If an employee submits an expense report on Tuesday morning, the employee is going to be reimbursed on Friday. And the reason is because our cutoff for expense reports are on Tuesday at 7 p.m. and the final validation from the treasury team is at 7 p.m. From that, we have a process that takes 2 days before being able to automatically reimburse the employee on their bank account. So this is also a game changer for employees. And this is a key element of your communication when you want to help them understanding why AI can be extremely valuable. And the last point is this is an enabler for optimization of your T&E program, because you're going to go through a review of your policy. You're going to go back to the process and how can we improve our process. This is a very important path, and AppZen and the AI that they offer helps on this journey. Let's now switch to the trust across the organization. It's a very important point because when you start activating the AI in an organization that is not yet ready, start thinking about it, but is not yet ready for that. You have to prove yourself. You have to show the value of it. So how do you prove that? You prove that by analyzing if you have any false positive or false negative. And this is the way we handled the level of trust within the organization. We went through a very long exercise of viewing false positive or false negative that we can spot within the treatment of the AI for the expense reports. And ultimately, this is how we reached the 99.41%. This 99.41% says what? Says that, in fact, the remaining portion to get to 100 is the possible false positive and false negative that you can have for XY reasons. But you can imagine, what does it mean? It means that you are accurate at a level of 99.41%. This is huge because we are talking about expense reports that could be in different languages. Airbus being a worldwide organization, we have employees traveling to China, traveling to India. They travel all over the world and to Dubai. So we have expense reports that are or receipts that are in different languages. How can you reach 99.41% accuracy with human beings? It's almost impossible. Second point is how can you get the trust? Internal audit for us was a key element. We basically went to our internal auditors and we said, look guys, we have this system. This system, you can access to it in full transparency. And we're going to prove that the system is fully accurate. After proving that, we basically handed over a user for each internal auditors that were interested in the system. And now they basically access the system without getting back to us. And we are only activated when you have very specific questions. The second level of trust comes from the executive of the organization. And by basically proving that what we said initially happened after the implementation and after the stabilization phase gives us today full trust from the executive. And each time I request improvements, I have the full support from the executive team. Benefits and results. So as already explained, fully compliant program, 99.41%. High level of automation. A peak of 60% pre-COVID. Today we are at 50% for extra reason that today we are analyzing through another optimization program that we are launching. I would say the expense reports that are not fully automated are usually the ones that hold an expense line with non-travel most of the time. And non-travel, in most of the organizations, they require a manual review. But we reduce as much as possible the non-travel to the bare minimum that we can accept within an expense system that is mostly for travel purpose. Of course, the high level of automation goes through the 85% of reduction of effort. Once again, the reduction of effort is not managed at expense report level, but at line item level. And this is the very lowest detail that you can get to be accurate. And we are extremely positive to get to 95% within 2023. Substantial savings, already explained, we went from 2 FTE to 0.2 FTE pre-COVID. And during the journey end of 2018 to February 2020, not only we reduced the T&E analysts that we needed for the review of the expense reports that were high risk, but we increased our volume of expense reports. So we increased our travel. So this is where AI becomes very interesting because you can suddenly manage the increase of activity with less stress in the organization, because you know that the AI is going to be here to absorb the increase of work. And the more automatized you are, less risk you create within the organization. Resource optimization. When you reduce your FTE, you have two options. You fire or you reallocate. We decided to reallocate within Airbus to more meaningful activities, more added value activities. And this is also a very important point when you want to have artificial intelligence accepted within the organization. Last point, it's an enabler for a global business service, for a shared service. And as I mentioned, our T&E program was the first program activated within our global business service in the US, in Americas, and then in Lisbon, Portugal. This created a lot of synergies and savings that today we are still basically benefiting from. What are the lessons learned from this journey? I talked about our objectives: increase of compliance, reduction of effort. Those were our major objectives. How do you get there? You need to put in place work streams, and we did that. We basically put in place several work streams. The first one was review our processes. Are we good when it comes to the expense process? Are we efficient enough? How are we when it comes to master data process? What do we do to be efficient as well on the accounting process? Because ultimately, when you issue your expense to the accounting team, do they have accurate figures? Do they have a file that can be automatically uploaded? Or do they have something that needs to be reclassed? Very important review. And governance. Because suddenly, you're going to spot areas of non-compliance. How are you going to address that? You need to involve HR, of course, but maybe you need to involve legal. So the governance process is extremely key. Second work stream, policy realignment. You have to review your policy, because AI will not work if you say, oh, you should spend a reasonable amount. No, reasonable amount doesn't work with AI. It's you have a maximum of $50 for your meal, or you have a maximum of, $1,000 a domestic flight. Those are clear rules, and with those clear rules, you also create a path for change in behavior from the employees and a better policy that sustain your program. System. So on our side, we use Concur, and of course we use AppZen. It was extremely important to kind of link both in the most efficient way possible, and we succeeded on that. Business intelligence. Business intelligence is the path for optimization and improvements. If you create a meaningful set of KPIs that are understandable and trackable, suddenly you open the door for all the improvements that are possible within your organization. This is something that you need to keep in mind and invest time on. And we have today a set of KPIs that are extremely powerful. Communication behavior, this is a key enabler for the program as well. Okay, so what's next? And where are we basically heading next? Our global expansion. This is where we're heading. I'm today in discussions. We signed the start of the project. I'm talking with my peers in Singapore, and we are activating our global program in Singapore. Tomorrow is going to be Malaysia. We are heading to South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Everything basically from the US. This is clear proof that we have not only trust, but we have a clear path now to help our colleagues in other entities to go back to compliance and go back to efficiency within the T&E program. So we have 8 committed entities for 2023, and we have planned 28. What are those 28? 28 different head of finance that I talked with that are interested in the program. For me, it's clear proof that we've been extremely successful. We will probably double the number of travel and expense in 2023, hopefully, if we don't have any other COVID coming. And this is also something that is critical because, I talked about being able to sustain the increase. This is exactly what we are now completely, I would say, ready for. We can sustain increase without any stress. And we also still need to focus on the increase of behavioral change and policy standardization across the organization. It is completely key. Closing thoughts. Once again, trust on the system, 99.41%. This is for us the most important element. And we've been successful. No reason that other organizations in the world cannot be successful with the program. And one last point for me, please travel, because if you have AppZen onboarded, it's going to be for you a very interesting journey. And if you travel, it's going to be good for customers, and it's going to also be very good for our industry. Thank you very much for your time.